Lena Matthews didn't believe in love anymore, the kind that people whispered about in bookstores or spilled across screens in cinematic promises. Her heart, once so tender and open, had become a vault, sealed with cold iron and the soundless echo of betrayal. She worked with the broken, the abused, the discarded, the people society brushed aside because she saw herself in them. Not in their scars necessarily, but in the way they learned to survive. Every morning she wore her armor of quiet confidence. Every evening she folded it beside her bed like a soldier too tired to keep pretending she wasn't still bleeding underneath. It had been for years since the man she thought would marry her disappeared with her trust, her savings, and a piece of her soul, leaving behind a haunting voicemail and a trail of lies too long to follow. Since then, Lena had built walls, beautiful ones, high ones, invisible to the untrained eye. And then came Eli. She hadn't planned to go on the retreat. It was meant for therapists like her, a mental health break in the crisp Colorado mountains, surrounded by nature and silence and the kind of people who talked about boundaries over coffee. Lena only went because her supervisor insisted. She arrived late, her suitcase dragging through slush, her patience as thin as the icy wind slicing across her face. The lodge was charming in a rustic wood smoke kind of way, but it was the quiet of stability that hit her hardest when she stepped inside. And that's when she saw him mealy, not in a dramatic spotlight kind of way. He wasn't the loudest voice in the room or the one making jokes by the fire. He was just ... still, sitting near the window, a mug between his hands, his eyes watching the snow like it might reveal answers. Their first conversation wasn't anything memorable. He asked if she needed help with her coat. She said no. He smiled gently and didn't press. She noticed his hands then big, calloused, the kind that had held something fragile and made it feel safe. She didn't know yet about his daughter, about the wife who died 3 years ago in a hospital room, filled with machines and the scent of fear. She didn't know how much of himself he'd buried to keep his child smiling. All she knew was that, when their eyes met, she didn't look away. Dinner was casual. Therapists loved talking about burnout, especially after a glass of wine, but Lena mostly listened. Ailey sat 2 seats down, occasionally smiling at something someone said, but mostly quiet, observant. When the storm hits it in, brutal, with winds strong enough to rattle windows, the power flickered, and they were told it was too dangerous to leave. Most people didn't mind. Some made a game of it. Others huddled with their phones and portable chargers. Lena found herself in the corner library, drawn by the scent of old pages and peace, and Eli was there again. Not by coincidence, he liked the quiet too. Didn't expect a blizzard, she said. Life rarely gives warnings. He replied. That was the beginning. They talked slowly, like people feeling the temperature of a long-forgotten lake. She asked about his book, told her it was a biography about a man who lost everything and still found a way to hope. She laughed bitterly. Sounds like fiction. He didn't argue, just looked at her, really looked, and she felt uncomfortable. In the way you do when someone sees past your words. Hours passed unnoticed. At some point the fire dimmed, the power went out entirely, and the staff brought out blankets and flashlights. Some people bundled together in the main room. Lena stayed in the library. So did Eli. You don't trust men, do you? He asked quietly, not accusingly, just a statement of truth wrapped in gentleness. She turned to him slowly. I trust data, patterns, and I've seen too many patterns to believe otherwise. Eli didn't try to convince her. He didn't say he was different, he just nodded. That makes sense? And that made her feel something she hadn't in a long time respected. Not challenged, not pursued, just when the wind howled louder and the windows trembled, she pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. Her hands trembled, not from fear of the storm, but the fear of vulnerability, Eli noticed. He didn't say anything, just reached out his hand, open palm, no pressure. She stared at it. You're not asking for anything? She whispered. No, he said, just offering something. Something shifted. Slowly, so slowly, she placed her hand in his. It was warm, steady, no squeezing, no tugging, just there. Hours passed. They talked in whispers about loss, about raising kids alone, about disappointment and laughter, and how hope sometimes hides in the smallest gestures. She told him about her ex, how he'd promised a ring and gave her nothing but debt, and she never saw it coming. Eli listened not like a therapist trying to fix her, but like a man who knew that silence could be sacred. When she finally fell asleep, her head tilted slightly against the worn armrest of the couch, her hand was still in his. He didn't move. He didn't shift. He stayed. Morning came with soft light breaking through the storm clouds. Power had returned. Sometime in the early dawn, people were stirring, stretching, laughing over how dramatic the night had been. Lena woke with a start, blinking, confused, till she saw him still there, still holding her hand, still not asking for anything. Pulled away slowly, gently, and he let her go without question. "Thank you," she whispered. He only nodded. That day they packed to leave. The roads were clearing. The storm was over. But something had happened. Something she couldn't explain or rationalize or file away in a clinical folder. Something about him, about the way he held space without trying to fill it. The way he saw her without needing to own her, had cracked something open inside her. She'd said she didn't trust men. And she still didn't most of them. But maybe she didn't need to believe in them all. Just one. Be just this one. The snow melted, but the memory of that night didn't. For weeks after the retreat, Lena found herself replaying it. Not the storm, not the cold, but the silence, the warmth, the calm that wrapped around her like Eli's steady presence. It unsettled her how safe she had felt, how naturally her hand had found its way into his, and how he hadn't turned that moment into anything more than what it was. He hadn't texted, he hadn't called, and yet she found herself watching her inbox, scrolling her missed calls, checking social media like a teenager hoping for a digital ghost. She didn't want him. She didn't know what to do with someone who wasn't chasing or manipulating or performing. Eli was nothing like the men who broke her. He was quiet, grounded, built like a shelter. And still, the voice inside her whispered, "Don't trust it, don't believe it." But another voice, fainter, braver, kept asking, "What if this time is different?" Then came the email. 2 weeks after the retreat, tucked between newsletters and spam, she saw it. Subject: "Hi, simple." From Eli. Her breath caught. She clicked it open. It read, "I know this is unexpected. I just wanted to say thank you for trusting me, even for a moment. If you're ever open to coffee, I'd like to hear more of your story. No pressure, just a hand, again, if you need it." No number, just his name. Lena stared at it for what felt like hours. Her fingers hovered over the keys. She closed the laptop, waited a day, then 2. Then she replied, "Right. I don't do coffee with strangers. But maybe I'd do coffee with someone who holds hands in storms." Responded an hour later with a time and place. A small cafe near the city park, quiet and unassuming. She went. When she saw him again, he was dressed simply: gray sweater, clean jeans, his daughter's tiny rainbow bead bracelet wrapped loosely around his wrist. Lena noticed it and smiled. "Nice accessory," she teased. He grinned. "She said it protects me from mean people." Lena raised an eyebrow. "Does it work?" He shrugged. "You tell me." The conversation flowed easily. He asked questions, but never pressed. She told him about her counseling work, the stories that clung to her like smoke, the ones she could never shake. He told her about his daughter, Mia, 6 years old, wild curls and wild questions. He spoke of his late wife, not in sadness but in reverence, like someone who had known real love and still believed in its power. Lena didn't know what to do with that. Most men either avoided their pasts or drowned in them. Eli seemed to live in peace with his. When they parted, he didn't reach for her hand. He didn't ask to see her again, simply smiled and said, "You know where to find me if you ever need another storm shelter." Lena didn't know if she wanted him. She only knew she wasn't afraid when he was near. That was new. They met again. Then again, parks, bookstores, museum, one rainy afternoon, where they wandered wordlessly through exhibits and ended up sitting in front of a watercolor of two hands, not quite touching. That's what it felt like, she whispered. Eli turned to her. That night, she nodded. And now she hesitated. It still feels like that, but I'm not scared of it anymore. He didn't say anything, just sat beside her, close enough to feel his warmth, far enough not to crowd. Lena found herself opening in pieces, like winter soil cracking beneath the first sun of spring. She told him things she hadn't said aloud in years about her father's absence, about the way she always chose men who left, about the night she almost stopped believing people could be good. Eli never tried to fix her. He just listened, nodded, and sometimes said things like, "I'm sorry that happened to you," or "You didn't deserve that." And slowly, Lena began to believe him. Mia entered the picture 6 weeks in. Lena. Had been hesitant kids made things real? Eli had waited until she asked. "I'd like to meet her," she said one afternoon. "Only if she's ready." He smiled. "She's been asking about you. Wants to know if you're the storm lady." Lena laughed. "I guess I am." Meeting Mia was like stepping into a tiny hurricane of color and questions. She was all energy and big brown eyes, a whirlwind in glitter sneakers. "Are you Daddy's new friend?" she asked on the playground, mid-swing. "I guess I am," Lena said carefully. Mia tilted her head. "You make him smile with his eyes? That's rare." Lena blinked. Kids see things. That day, they built a sandcastle, shared snacks, and when Mia hugged her goodbye, she whispered, "Please don't disappear." Lena hugged her back tightly. "I'm not planning to." But inside, that old fear trembled because staying meant risking everything. The seasons shifted. Fall bled into winter again. 1 year since the night in the lodge, Eli and Lena weren't officially anything, but they also weren't not. They were careful. They were close. And yet Lena hadn't stayed the night. Not once. Not even when the air turned brittle and the nights long. She didn't know what he wanted from her. But when she asked, he answered simply, "I want you to heal at your pace. I want to be here, whether you ever sleep beside me or not." And he was. Birthdays, panic attacks, late-night phone calls, client breakdowns. Eli was always there. One snowy evening, she found herself standing outside his door, drenched from sleet, shaking, her body craving not sex, not romance, but rest. He opened the door, pulled her into the warm light, said nothing. She slipped off her shoes, curled up on the couch. "Can I just sleep here?" she whispered. "Yes," he said, already laying out a blanket. She lay down. He sat beside her, just like that night, and reached for her hand. She gave it to him. No kiss, no expectations, just fingers tangled like roots beneath soil. They stayed like that all night. When she woke, sunlight pouring in through frosted windows, he was still holding her hand, still there, still not asking her to be anything but exactly who she was. Eventually, the labels didn't matter. She didn't say she trusted him. She didn't have to. Showed in the way she called him first, in the way she leaned her head on his shoulder at the park, in the way she brought him coffee just the way he liked it, always with 2 napkins, always with a smile that meant more than words ever could. One evening, as they watched Mia perform her chaotic school play from the back row, Lena felt something shift again. Mia ran off stage at the end and threw herself into Lena's arms first. "We're a team now," she said. Lena met Eli's eyes. And in that moment, she realized she hadn't just healed, she'd grown. She hadn't just survived the storm, she'd found shelter and roots and maybe even love. And so, on the anniversary of the night, they first held hands. Lena planned something she'd never thought she'd be brave enough to do. She returned to that mountain lodge. She booked the same room, the same weekend, fighted him without explanation. When he arrived, confused but smiling, she took his hand and led him to the same couch. "I was terrified then," she said softly. "And now?" he asked. She nodded, took a breath. "I'm still scared, but I'm not running." He reached for her hand. "I've never let go." That night, as the snow began to fall gently outside, they sat together, just like they had 1 year ago. Nothing rushed, nothing forced. Just two broken people who had chosen to build something quiet and unshakable from the rubble of their past. And somewhere between the silences, the storms, and the slow surrender, Lena whispered the words she never thought she'd say again. I trust you. And this time she meant it.